I'm a Northern MP, right? When I'm lucky enough to go home, I get to go home to North Yorkshire.
Yeah.
I don't know where you came from on Sunday.
Dumfries.
Right. Well, so you know what? I think that if you look to people across the north, what most people will tell you is it's actually getting around the northern towns and cities, east to west, are the bigger concern that most people have.
Okay, let's speak to the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, now, who's joined me in the conference hall in Manchester. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I don't know, you probably only heard the very tail end of that, but it was Lord Berkeley, who is, you're looking at me like you're about to spring something on me. It was Lord Berkeley, who is part of the Oakerby review. And he was saying actually the cost of HS2, the bit that we're speculating about, the whole thing is going to be £180 billion. Is that too much money?
Well, look, of course, I know who Lord Berkeley is, and he participated in an independent review of HS2 some time ago. I think without getting into the specifics of what he was saying, which I didn't catch the detail of, it's clear that the costs of this programme have escalated far beyond what anyone thought at the beginning. I know there's lots of speculation on it, but all I'd say is I'll approach this in the same way I approach everything in this job. I will take the time to look at it properly, get across the detail, and then decide what's right for the country. And the sums involved, as you've heard, are enormous. And it's right that Prime Minister takes proper care over it. It's ultimately not my money, it's taxpayers' money, and we should make the right decisions on these things.
Absolutely. So how long are you going to take to make up your mind? Is it a decision that you might have reached already, or that you might announce tomorrow?
Without getting into the nitty-gritty of all the speculation, look, I'm always going to take the time to get things right for the country, and you saw that with net zero. Recent announcement, I took the time to understand all the plans, and I didn't like what I saw. I've had long-standing concerns about the impact of some of the policies in place on ordinary families, the fact that they would be asked to spend £5,000, £10,000, £15,000 installing heat pumps, replacing boilers, improving the energy efficiency of their homes in rural areas, or indeed switching cars before any of that was necessary in order to meet our targets. So I decided to set out a new approach. Now, look, I got criticism for that, and that's fine, but I believed it was the right thing to do for the country in the long term, and that's what I'm about, and that's the change that I want to bring.
If the decision is that a pragmatic one, a financial one, that this is too expensive and we need to abandon this, the Birmingham to Manchester bit, but we will give you something back in return, what would you say to people listening, people here who are listening at home in Manchester, who are really concerned, obviously, because they feel that something's been taken away from them, so they need to be given something back? What would you say to them? Well,
what I'd say to everybody is you could just look at my track record of making sure that we invest in communities across the north, across the Midlands. As Chancellor, I created 3 ports. There's one in Teesside, there's one in Merseyside. In Teesside, up and running, attracting billions of pounds of investment from overseas, creating thousands of jobs. I was a Chancellor who put the Treasury, the most powerful arm of government, in Darlington as a symbol of my commitment and trying to change how we do governing and draw on a wider range of talent and spread opportunity. But also, just at this conference on Sunday, we announced £1 billion in funding for 55 towns across the UK, many of them in the North and Midlands, where we're giving local people the tools and putting them in charge of their community so that they can make the improvements and bring the change that they want to see, whether that's better high streets, safer communities, or restoring civic buildings. That's an example of me recognising, look, more people live in towns and cities in our country. They don't always get the attention that they deserve, but this government is backing them with £1 billion of long-term funding and putting them in control of it, and that's something I'm really excited about. And again, example of us delivering for people everywhere.
The transport links around here, though, they're pretty bad. I mean, I was trying to get to the conference on Sunday, and everything went into meltdown. And talking to people, they just see this is just how it is, and they feel really, really neglected. And then, Prime Minister, then they think, you're going to take this away from us, but you're going to extend HS2 into Euston, not Old Oak Common, and it looks like the haves and the have-nots. Do you understand that perception?
Yeah, well, look, I'm a Northern MP, right? When I'm lucky enough to go home, I get to go home to North Yorkshire.
Yeah.
I don't know where you came from on Sunday.
Dumfries.
Right. Well, so you know what? I think that if you look to people across the north, what most people will tell you is it's actually getting around the northern towns and cities, east to west, are the bigger concern that most people have. And I know that, as I said, I live on the other side of the Pennines. But we are very much investing in communities everywhere. We're putting record transport investment in currently, more so than has ever happened across the North and the Midlands. But it's right that we focus that on people's priorities, as you say, making sure that it's easier for them to get around in their day-to-day lives.
Now, HS2 is something that's very much dominating the conference. It feels that way. The other thing, rather bizarrely, is Liz Truss, who appeared yesterday, sellout event. There are 60 Tories in Liz Truss's Growth Caucus, which is almost the same as your majority. Are you worried about that?
No, not at all. Look, we're lots of Conservatives here. I think the mood is great. People are excited about the things we're doing. They think the decision that I've made on net zero is the right one because it will save families £5,000, £10,000, £15,000. A new approach, not easy, but the right long-term thing for the country. They're excited about the announcement we've made on towns, backing 55 towns with £1 billion of long-term funding. They're excited about our announcement about the national living wage, which is going to give a £1,000 pay rise to 2 million low-paid workers next year. And they think we're doing the right thing today with the Jade's Law, which is important and actually just demonstrating that the values of this party are the same as the values of the common sense majority of our country. If someone murders their partner, of course they shouldn't have rights to those children afterwards. And we're going to pass a law that's going to fix that. People will remember what happened a few years ago. And I think, look, these are the things that we're talking about, and people are united behind those types of ideas.
William Hague says that you should focus more on your values and less on policies. You talked about values there. Is there some way that you can connect a bit more with the public? We've had focus groups and they've said that they feel that you're rich, you're out of touch. Those are the kind of things that come through on focus groups that we've done here on Times Radio. Is there something that you can tell people who are listening today to Times Radio, something about yourself that perhaps they don't know that might connect you more to them? Because there seems to be a little bit of a problem there.
No, I think what people want from their prime ministers and their leaders is to do things that can make a difference to their lives, right? I don't think people are as interested in how much money is in my bank account. They're interested in what I'm doing for them. And the decision on net zero was a great example of that. I was taking a decision, which, by the way, I got a lot of flack for from a lot of people, that ultimately is just going to save families in this country money, thousands of pounds of money, not forcing them to rip out their boiler, install a heat pump, change their car, change how their home is operating. I didn't think that was right. I don't think people who are saying that all these households and these families should have to bear these costs with regardless of what impact it would have on them, I don't think that approach was right. So I took a decision to change things. I think that's the right long-term decision for the country. It's not an easy one. People hadn't done it before. There was a kind of cosy consensus that had built up that this was all fine. This debate is dominated by ideological extremes, and I got attacked for it. But I'm going to do what I think is right for the country, and I think people will continue to see that. They saw it with the Town's announcement. They'll see it with my approach to net zero. They'll see it this week as well.
Okay, Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Breakfast. He'd already said elsewhere that he was not going to give up on HS2. And, even if you ask about timelines, is this going to be something have you made up your mind? Are you going to announce it tomorrow in your speech? Obviously he was not going to tell us that. Was there anything at all in what he said that made you think that this is definitely going to happen tomorrow?
I think the most interesting thing that the Prime Minister said there was that getting east to west is the biggest challenge for those living in the north. And the reason why that's interesting is because a lot of the conversation around this infrastructure project is about whether or not there should be a trade-off and whether actually people from Manchester really care about getting down to London faster than they can now, or whether people care about being able to move across the north of the country. If you live in the north, you will know that it is nigh on impossible to get a train that's reliable, that's big enough from east to west of the country. It's very, very difficult indeed. The counter-argument to that is, why should people in the north have to choose between one and the other? Why should they not be given the opportunity to do both? And that's what HS2 was designed to deliver. You were supposed to have a line that went from London to Manchester, but also extended across to Leeds with a high-speed 2 connection, and then Northern Powerhouse Rail. The reason why we asked the Prime Minister these questions about timing and about decision-making is because it's a huge long-term infrastructure project, and we've already seen earlier this week that some companies are starting to withdraw jobs from the labour market because they don't have certainty. These kinds of decisions are what the foundations of, this kind of Prime Minister is suggesting that he's built on. So if you can't commit to them, it becomes a real problem. And I think the suggestion there that I've taken from what the Prime Minister said, east to west is the biggest challenge, is that yes, we are likely to see that line north of Birmingham to Manchester is not going to go ahead, and that in fact actually it will be Northern Powerhouse Rail that the Prime Minister promises to people. There will be lots of people in the north who will be pleased to hear that, and there'll be others who say we should have both and it shouldn't be downgraded.
He wanted to talk about net zero as well, because I think he saw that as a success in terms of communication, which is something that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I think that this is a strategy we're going to see increasingly from the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, which is the notion that we are now getting Sunak unleashed. This is the real version of him. And there's a reason for that, because he wants to present to the electorate an idea that, you might have seen me around, but you don't really know me. You don't know what kind of guy I am. And that's why you start hearing things like, I take tough decisions, and I got a lot of flack for that. That's a line he's repeated more than once. He wants people to know that he's not afraid of the criticism that's coming his way, because he thinks in his head he's doing the right thing. There were questions, though, about that decision too. I mean, yes, the country is committed to 2050 in terms of net zero, but others will say we should be pushing the boundaries. We should be going further and faster. And actually, if you have a target which is industry-based about electric cars, if you change that, then that changes the timescale for people delivering jobs in this country. Others will say the Prime Minister is very focused on the pound in your pocket, and that is what's going to be the focus of the next general election. And if he's delivering savings for people, then that can only ever be a good thing.
What about the threat from the Liz Truss wing of the party? He looks bemused by that, really, but I suppose he would have to.
Yeah, I think there is a convention that former Prime Ministers don't attend conferences again, especially the year actually after they've left office. They allow the new Prime Minister the opportunity and the space to create their own story. That's what conference is about. I think he looks bemused because actually what Liz Truss is doing is quite odd. Many people think it's quite odd. For her to come to conference at all is a very brave move, but for her to host a rally under his nose the day of the Chancellor's speech talking about tax is a huge moment. As I said before, it's not Liz Truss personally that's the problem, but the big question, I think, for the Prime Minister is how much is he going to allow that wing of the party to force him to tack in that direction. And if he does do that, there'll be questions about his leadership, and that, I think, is a focus for the speech on Wednesday too. Well, that actually is what a lot of people are waiting to see on Wednesday. They want to see a moment where he will deliver a speech that looks confident and that he is a leader who is going to be able to take them into the next election. The thing about Liz Truss and Boris Johnson is that they appealed to activists in the party because people felt like they understood their ideology, what they were about, where they were coming from, and what they were kind of selling, or at least they understood a little bit about the person, the politician. I think the problem for Rishi Sunak is he hasn't really yet let people in on that personal ideological side, and it's about the values that people don't know really. If you ask people to define his values, I'm not sure that you really could. And I think still with the activists, although they're very respectful of him and they have a lot of time to listen to him, Conservative activists, they're still not quite sure whether they would go for a drink in the pub with him.
Oh dear. What about the speech tomorrow? William Hague says something really interesting in the column today. He said that, you don't want things to leak, so you only tell 3 people. What do you think is actually going to happen today? Do you think there's going to be a cabinet meeting today at which this is all signed off? The HS2, the Manchester leg is going to be scrapped?
The suggestion is that there will be a political cabinet meeting today. I mean, and look, and I say this because I have to say it in these terms, the speculation we think, because Number 10 is still saying no final decision has been made on this project. And you heard Rishi Sunak there talking about long-term decision making. But the theory is that there will be a political cabinet here to sign that off, and that in his speech he will make that announcement that the leg of HS2 will be scrapped. But I think the other focus for the speech is, as I said, a bit more personal, a bit more about what drives him as a politician, and a bit of credibility and leadership, actually. To say, yes, fine, Liz Truss is here and we're going to be dismissive of it, but actually I'm here as your Prime Minister. I'm the person who's going to push this forward, and I've got a strategy for the next election. And it isn't just about policy here, policy there. It's an overarching thread. And I think that's what his speechwriters have been working on behind the scenes, coupling that with the idea that long term is a buzzword that people want to hear, but also that they want to understand that the Prime Minister is going to help them reduce their bills. I mean, that's going to be the focus for lots of people and how they will vote in the next election.
Does it feel, and maybe it feels this way to us because we talk around these things, and there must be a huge amount of support for Rishi Sunak within the party, but obviously we're focusing on people who are applauding Liz Truss because she was elected and Rishi Sunak was not. And that's kind of like shades of Gordon Brown, for me anyway. I don't know about everyone else. Is this kind of has it slipped beyond his grasp already? Not through any fault of his own, but just because of the madness of circumstances.
Some people think that. Some people think that having so many prime ministers in such a short space of time means that actually some voters who look at the Tory party will say, I don't know what you're about, and actually I don't really want to know. I'm done listening to you. I'm not interested. There are other people who say that actually Rishi Sunak is not, he doesn't necessarily come over that badly with everybody. His personal ratings are actually okay for a Conservative Prime Minister. And that there is a way in which you can run a campaign where he is the focus of a sort of presidential offer, which is, I'm the real Rishi Sunak and this is what I think. Remember that he's far more right-wing in many ways than lots of people give him credit for. We know him from the sort of pandemic and from giving a lot of money to people on the furlough scheme, but actually his instincts are more to the right of the party. Are we going to see more of that? While at the same time the Conservative Party is selling this message that you don't want to change things now because, look, the economy's looking up, you're starting to feel better in your pocket, and actually you want us to keep going. What you don't want is a new Labour government with loads of different ideas. You definitely don't want that. I think that's their strategy, is to try and couple those two things together. But I think there are some pretty big gaps there too, and HS2 is an example of one of those.
Well, absolutely. And if you're a prudent ex-chancellor, you're not going to sign a cheque for £180 billion or £106 billion, whatever it might be when it comes to HS2.
Well, actually, a lot of those cheques have already been signed. And, this is the thing about long-term infrastructure planning. Costs do go up. And I think what you heard from Andy Street, who's the West Midlands Mayor, yesterday, was a suggestion that he had private businesses who were willing to take some of the responsibility for that and also, take some of the cost and look at it again.
Yes. Kate, thank you very much for that. That is Kate McCann. She is Times Radio's political editor.